Whoo boy. Well, Zach, I don't know what to say after that. I don't know what that was. I don't know where the Broncos go from here. That was rough on many levels. So rough that it didn't even feel right to play our intro song. That song is way too happy for the vibe right now.
Yeah, just tears after that, Ryan. No, my boys, nothing fun. To pretty much put this game into perspective, Devontae Booker was the best Bronco on the field today, and he's been gone for, a few months right now, Ryan. He outrushed the Broncos. He had more touchdowns than the Broncos, and he had as many points as the Broncos. That is how bad this game was. And the Broncos didn't even try to keep him last year. So that's just the type of player that the Broncos thought he was. And the Broncos got beat, not just in all three phases of the game, but when you break it down, they got beat in every single phase of every single phase.
It was ugly, and there's a lot of finger pointing that needs to go around. And Drew Lock, you can never throw four interceptions in a game. Ever. It can't happen. It's inexcusable. All of them but one were definitely his fault, in my opinion. The one at the end of the half, there's a little bit of Jerry Jeudy involvement there. I thought on that route, you need to cross the face of the safety just about every time. But even then, an ill-advised throw from Drew Lock, you can't be making that throw there because you're going to get points on the board no matter what, as long as you make a safe throw in that position. So four interceptions that are all bad. They all look really bad on tape, and the more you watch them, they just get worse. So it starts there. Got to be better from him. Pat Shurmur, another bad game plan. Phillip Lindsay touches the ball 4 times. Don't tell me what he had on the 4 touches. You have to let that guy play. You can't just say, oh, well, it's not working, so we're just going to abandon it. Even Melvin Gordon didn't touch the ball enough, in my opinion. He actually played pretty darn well. Maybe I thought he was running as good as he's run all season. 11 carries, 46 yards. That's a 4.2-yard average. He needed to touch the ball more. Zach, I'm sure you have the exact drop back stat, but that's 2 weeks in a row where they drop back over 50 times in a game. It's not a formula for winning, and it started early, and I realized that they were trying to take the run away and stacking the box. Guess what? You signed Melvin Gordon because he's the best running back against stack boxes in the league over the last 3 years, other than Ezekiel Elliott. So bad from him. Terrible from Tom McMahon and his special teams units. Vic Fangio, got to do better. Got to have your team more prepared. The Broncos defense, they had it going for a little bit there, and so I put them lower on the list, but you gave up 37 points. So guess what, Zach? It's another week. 4 straight weeks of giving up 30 points or more. This is bad, and it's bad across the board.
It's bad every single place you look, Ryan. Drew Lock dropped back 51 times in this game, and between Melvin Gordon, Royce Freeman, and Phillip Lindsay, they had 17 carries together. This is clearly a team now, Ryan, that cannot win with Drew Lock carrying the team on the shoulders. That is very obvious. At this point right now, Drew Lock is not good enough for that. Now, he's done it the past 2 fourth quarters, but when you look at the majority of the season, that is not a winning formula. And we found out today that Drew can't do that consistently. He's had 2 great fourth quarters, but Ryan, outside of that, it's been nothing. So it's inexcusable to be dropping back 51 times with him, especially when the game's still close at the end of that first half. I mean, very close. Vic Fangio, after the game, said, I asked him what his message was to the team after the game, and he said that the second half was inexcusable. The first half was close. The Broncos played a really bad first half in many phases. The defense bent, but it didn't break. The offense was moving the ball. Ryan, the offense had 200 yards in the first half, 196 to be precise, and yet only 6 points, but they're still in the game. And in the second half, the entire Broncos team just absolutely broke. So Ryan, Drew Lock is not the guy right now to be dropping back 51 times. You have to be doing other things. So yeah, the blame is all around. No one is without blame today.
Yeah, but Zach, this team wasn't designed to ride Drew Lock. Like, the whole offseason, we were talking about how, okay, you're going to have a good running game and a good defense, and Drew Lock is just going to have to steady things. And it's especially not designed to be run by Drew Lock and for the offense to completely go through Drew Lock when you have a fifth string right tackle in the game. The offensive line was brutal today. It's not all on them. But the Raiders just pinned their ears back. The Broncos couldn't pick up blitzes, and Drew Lock got crushed back there. Just one after another. He's getting work done on his ribs. He's coming back out there. If I could say one good thing about Drew Lock today, it's that he showed a lot of toughness. Other than that, it was pretty rough from him across the board. Never got into a rhythm, made some nice throws, but probably the worst game he's played in his entire career, in a game where the Broncos needed him to play the best game of his career, or one of the best games of his career. So the offensive line was bad. They couldn't run the ball. Drew Lock was bad. The game plan was bad. It's just, I guess, when it all goes wrong like that, that's how you get blown out by a fairly average Raiders team. Derek Carr did nothing in this game. 16 to 25 for 154 yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions. And you get blown out by 25 points. Just terrible.
That's the only place that you could point and say maybe the Broncos weren't awful, is their pass defense. But it's hard because Derek Carr didn't need to do anything. So it's not like the Broncos were just stopping him left and right. In fact, the Raiders hurt themselves the most. Darren Waller dropping an open touchdown. Nelson Aguilar dropping a touchdown in the end zone. Ryan, this game was so bad. Now the Raiders are 6-3. So some people may say, okay, Broncos lost to a good team. According to Pro Football Reference, with all the stats they compile and put in, the Raiders should have been about a 500 team entering this game. They won some close games, so it made them look a little better than they were. But Ryan, the Raiders have a bottom 10 defense entering today, giving up over 28 points per game. Broncos dropped 12. Broncos dropped 6 before, the Raiders really went into prevent mode. Broncos unable to do anything. This offense outside of 2 fourth quarters this year under Drew Lock has really been inept. It is at a scary point right now for what this means for the future. And the defense just bend. And then all of a sudden, you can only bend so much before you break. They break, and holy smokes, special teams. Oh my goodness. And that happened. That and the Broncos offense really happened when the game mattered the most. What are you doing, Deontay Spencer? It not only does he only get to the 4-yard line, but Ryan, he runs in a circle. He turns his back the wrong way. What is going on? At that point in the game, it was the very beginning of the game, and you're already going, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. Those of us who have watched every Broncos game for the last however many years knew where this game was trending when that was how it started. It was like, okay, it's going to be one of these today. Okay, all right, that's fine, whatever. I don't think that's ever worked on a kickoff. Like that, maybe you can get away with that on a punt return because the field's a little bit more condensed. But when you're completely spread out going down the field, just running in circles usually isn't getting you anywhere, especially when all the guys on the other side are taught to have lane, discipline. So it was bad from the start. There should have been a Hunter Renfrow return for a touchdown on a punt if it wasn't for the Raiders just being idiots. Completely unnecessary. The flag that was thrown on them, it had nothing to do with that being a touchdown.
We call that a Domata Peko play, right?
Yes. We call that the Raiders just being the Raiders. Like multiple times in this game, I was just like, man, they just really can never not just be the Raiders. Like several dumb penalties on them. And the worst part about that, Zach, is there was a long time where the Raiders being the Raiders happened in the process of the Broncos beating them. And even when they weren't good, they found a way. Today, it was just brutal. And we are entering a dark, dark area, Zach. We are entering is Drew Lock not the answer area, which a lot of people are already there. But it's getting harder and harder to be not in that area. I'm not out on Drew Lock. Why? Mostly for the reason that there's 7 more games. And as much as people want to whine and moan about it, he's going to be the quarterback for most of those 7 games. I can't say all because I don't know what's going to happen. But we're entering a dangerous area where it's, okay, you need a new quarterback. We're entering a dangerous area where it's, okay, you need a head coach. I'm sorry, Zach. You can't keep firing all these guys, but you also can't have a defensive mastermind head coach who gives up 30 points a game every game.
You're 100% right. And Ryan, it's not going to get easier next week. Broncos play the 6-3 Dolphins, who are 3-0 under their new quarterback. They have a great defense. They have a really good young quarterback who's not making any mistakes. Then you host the 7-2 Saints. That's going to be fun. Then you go on the road in what is still a primetime game to play the Kansas City Chiefs, who are 8-1, have only lost to this Oakland Raiders team, by the way. And then you get your first team who has a losing record in this stretch. And the Panthers, look, they compete every single game. You're going on the road for that. Ryan, we are very much looking at a possibility of the Broncos not being favored in a single game this year. They haven't been favored up until now. They're certainly not going to be favored next week, even though it was a pick'em game before today. I think they opened as 3-point underdogs. I believe that's what I saw on DraftKings Sportsbook just after this game today. And they're not going to be favored again. So while the Broncos started 0-3, then they made a nice little comeback. And, last week they had a chance to be 500. Now we're looking at what could be a very, very rough couple of months. And if it goes that way, you're 100% right. It's more than just looking for a new offensive coordinator, special teams coach, quarterback, head coach. It may be all of the above. So the Broncos will need to do something to stop this. And what was interesting was after the game today, Ryan, Vic Fangio was asked, where is this team right now? Where is their headspace? And he said, we're going to have to find out when they come back to work on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think that's a very real and honest answer from Vic. I think it's also a very scary answer.
It's a scary answer. The scariest thing I saw today was Tim Patrick excusing himself from the game. Like, don't tell me this would – I honestly, my take on this is that he wanted to leave the game. Like, he threw that punch knowing exactly what was going to happen. He went to the sideline, took his helmet off. Like, he was ready to be ejected. Then they didn't eject him, and he was like, oh, okay, puts his helmet back on, runs back out on the field, and then, jogs off. That is a team that's lost their cool, and he has plenty of reason to be frustrated. Don't get it twisted. Everyone should be frustrated. But to me, that looked like a guy who was ready to hit the showers early.
Yeah, and just, Ryan, this team had been good, had been showing progress, that Vic Fangio was getting them to be disciplined and be smart. There was none of that today. I mean, just when it felt like the Broncos were picking up some momentum, whether it was a pick, whether it was a stupid penalty, whether it was, a dumb mental mistake, they did that in every single level of the game. And that's never, ever going to be successful. I mean, they Raidered more than the Raiders did today. And the Raiders tried to do that, yet the Broncos still lost by 25 points.
Yeah, and again, it was just bad across the board. And Zach, the conversations, they just get tougher and tougher because like I said, there are plenty of excuses for this team, and I feel like I've made them all. I've made the excuses for Drew Lock. I've made the excuses for Vic Fangio. I mean, half the damn team is injured. But there's a competence that you need to see from a football team, regardless of who's out there on the field. And you just, especially today, did not see it. That was not a competent football team out there. The O-line was a sieve. The quarterback's throwing everything off his back foot to the other team. It was bad news bears, and I totally understand why the fans are pissed, and there is apathy setting in and all of those things. So I get it. But Zach, the conversations just get more and more difficult. So if they're giving up 30, 40 points again, I don't know what they're going to give up when they start playing really good offenses, which we haven't even seen yet. If that starts happening, okay, so you got to fire Vic Fangio. Well, now you move up the ladder. Do you trust John Elway on another coaching search? Do you trust John Elway on another quarterback search? Because the odds are stacking up against him in terms of, whether or not he's going to be able to get this right at some point.
Ryan, everything is trending in the wrong direction for the Broncos. When you start on a very minuscule scale of, Drew Lock and his performance this year, to the big stuff. Now, if you do move on from Vic Fangio or you move on from Drew Lock at the end of this year, then all of that is trending down as well, because when was the last time that the Broncos had a good coach? Well, now you have to go back multiple coaches to when Gary Kubiak was here. When was the last time the Broncos had a good quarterback? Of course, you have to go on the quarterback carousel and circle around about 17 times before you get to Peyton Manning. And it's tough. It's very tough. And right now, last week, it was all right there for the Broncos. They could go for 4-4. Now we're talking about, when are the Broncos going to get their next win at 3 wins? When's that next time when they're going to get the 4th? So everything is very quickly seeming to be just going out of control and off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I hate being here, Zach, but here we are once again. We've reached a point where it's not the worst thing in the world that the Broncos aren't going to be favored in a single game for the rest of the season, because we know that they're not going to the playoffs. And once you're not going to the playoffs, you don't tank, because no one does that. And we already know that John Elway definitely is not going to do that from the top. But when you lose, it's not the worst thing in the world. Now, I'll still remain when I say that the best thing for the Broncos is for Drew Lock to figure it out at some point. You do not want to, because
Without a doubt.
Look at what's happening across the league. Devontae Booker leaves the Broncos offense, has success. Isaiah McKenzie leaves the Broncos offense, has success. There might be a bigger internal problem than just going through all these quarterbacks. That the reason I say this is because you might bring in another guy and he might go right down this path again. So the best thing for the Broncos is still for Drew Lock to figure it out and show and develop. Today, he took a step in the wrong direction. He made, last week he said, I'll make that throw off my back foot again, and he was right. He did it again multiple times in this game, and it's going to cost him dearly when it comes to the end of the season when we're looking at his stats, because he's in an uphill battle now to even get to a 1-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. So, Zach, just changing the quarterback again is no guarantee of future success. In fact, the odds are stacked against it right now, especially in terms of the people who are going to be in charge of choosing who that quarterback is.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And so, Ryan, what's going to happen? I know it's driving some people crazy that the Broncos aren't putting Brett Rippon in, but that's not what they should do. You ride with Drew Lock for these final 7 games. If he goes out there and throws no touchdowns and 4 interceptions, or I guess 1 touchdown and 4 picks, well, that stinks in the short term. But that's great, because then you're going to go 3-13 and you're going to have a chance at the top 3, top 4 quarterback in this draft. Maybe a chance to trade up to number 2 if the Jaguars are silly enough to do that. But then you get yourself your best shot at getting the next best quarterback. Because you're right, Ryan. There's no guarantee that that's even going to turn out. Let's say Drew Lock figures it out, and in the last 6 games of the season, I'll give him one week of a break. He just lights it up, 18 touchdowns, 4 picks, something like that. Then you're saying, okay, he just needed time. And you know what? Some guys do need time. But Vic Fangio is not going to bench Drew Lock. And thank you for that, Vic, because that is not what should happen in this season. After the game, Vic was asked about it, and he said, we're committed to Drew. The more he can play, the better he will be. He's got to fight through this. We're going to continue to play him. Now, we'll find out if what Vic said about the more he can play, the better he'll be, because it's not looking like that right now. It's looking like the opposite. And if that's the case, may not be the worst thing for the Broncos long-term. Let's say it is the case and he gets better, then that's a great thing for the Broncos long-term. And like you said, Ryan, that's the best thing for the Broncos long-term. But just Brett Rippon, no, don't go in. Do not do that. And I'm happy that Vic Fangio is not going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I could have made a case for bringing in Brett Rippon at the end of the game, because Drew Lock was getting teed off on. And again, you want to give Drew Lock a chance to figure it out. There are plenty of cases of quarterbacks who have figured it out over time, the more they play. But other than that, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. You want to find out with Drew Lock. You got to keep, sinking or swimming with Drew Lock. All right, Zach, we are contractually obligated to call someone the king of the game. So we've got our king of the game. And it's really the king of the team, king of the season, king of the era for the Broncos. Let's bring it up.
Yay!
Brandon McManus, 2 for 2 on field goals, 1 for 1 on extra points, and a 50-yard field goal from deep. Truly, Zach, I don't know. I guess you could give it to Bryce Callahan. Would have been the other candidate here, but it just felt like one of those days where the kicker's the only one who really deserves this.
Yeah, he's the only one. And Ryan, you're giving the Broncos a little too much credit there. He didn't even kick an extra point because they had to go for 2.
Oh, you're right.
They didn't even get the 2. That's one where you have to laugh. You laugh through the tears because that's how bad it was. Bryce Callahan, man, I gave him his due credit in the game, and then he gets beat. He could have easily gotten beat for what would that have been, like a 50, 60, 70-yard touchdown if Darren Waller catches the ball. Maybe Bryce catches him and makes the tackle. But, Bryce was probably the best player on defense. Josh Watson, maybe the best player on special teams, at least made the biggest play for the Broncos there. And end list for the Broncos. So the Broncos offensive special team player, or the Broncos best player on offense, was their kicker.
Yeah, in my opinion, Jerry Jeudy, he continues to put good games and good film out there. I think he needed to run his route through a little harder on the pick in the end zone there at the end. He probably just didn't think the ball was coming to him because he was very much covered. But again, that's a little gripe I have. Other than that, he was pretty good. He was open on another third down where the Broncos' right side of the line got absolutely mauled, and Drew Lock wasn't able to get it there. He was looking there. He wanted to throw it there, but he had to bail out of the pocket early because the right side completely collapsed. It's a calamity of errors for the Broncos right now. And unfortunately for Drew Lock, he's going to bear the brunt of the criticism. And that's just what comes along with being the starting quarterback of an NFL franchise. What sucks, though, Zach, is that his supporting cast isn't helping him. And that makes it so much more difficult for a guy like that to get, to blend, to kind of get going. He's gonna struggle to get going because there's no running game to speak of right now, and that's on Pat Shurmur. They're not calling good games, and that's on Pat Shurmur. The offensive line can't block anyone right now, and it's all kind of coming down on Drew's shoulders. But as a guy who's trying to learn and develop, he's not good enough right now to be able to handle all that, like you mentioned in the beginning. So it sucks for him because he's going to be the one taking the brunt of this, and he's regressing, or at least he did this week, because of the fact that he is having to try and do everything without getting much help around him.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, what's crazy is when you look at these numbers, Jerry Jeudy had 4 catches on 8 targets. 8 targets is a lot, and it still didn't feel like enough. It feels like Jerry Jeudy, especially without Cortland Sutton, especially when Tim Patrick's thrown out of the game, Jerry Jeudy needs to be getting like 12 targets a game. It's crazy. Before that final drive in total garbage time where there was no chance of them coming back in the game, Jerry Jeudy had 43 receiving yards. That can't happen. Just the running game was so inept. Drew Lock's getting hit. Drew Lock said that he was fine after the game, just a little banged up. Vic Fangio said he had a little something in the game, but the trainers and Drew said he was fine. It's tough. And then, of course, Josh Jacobs on the other side. We knew that was going to be a very tough part to stop, Ryan, without the entire first-string defensive line for the Broncos. Josh Jacobs goes for 100 rushing yards in 3 quarters. They didn't really even use him in the fourth. He finishes with 112 on the day, and Devontae Booker goes for 81, and then you had Derek Carr go for another 10. So another 200 yards on the ground against this Broncos defense. There's no bright spots from this game. Yeah.
Very few. Bryce Callahan is the one where I'll say, like, that guy played a pretty damn good game. It's rough. It's really rough. And this was a do or die game as far as I was concerned, especially with the schedule just kind of snowballing from here. It definitely doesn't get easier, Zach. It gets harder and harder and harder and harder. So good luck because it's going to get more difficult and it could very much get ugly.
If the Broncos won this game, Ryan, and then they would have to beat the Dolphins as well. But then we'd be talking about if they were to make the playoffs and sneak in even as a 7 seed, we'd be talking about how this Broncos team could actually make a legitimate run in the playoffs, because it would have meant that they would have beaten a lot of good teams. On the flip side, since they didn't win today, since they didn't win last week, and they're looking at 3-6, you look at the opposite and you say they may not win more than a game, more than 2 games. 3 games right now, as crazy as it seems, to go 6-10, I think would be a win just with how bad it looks. So unfortunately, when you're at this point of the season, Ryan, and some fans absolutely hate this, but is winning 3 games in the best interest of the Broncos down this final 7? Probably not.
Yeah, all right, we got our guy Mace here. Let's bring him in. Mace, how you doing, my guy?
I'm doing much better than the Broncos. I mean,
most of us are.
Yeah, I got to spend a Broncos-Raiders game on the road in a functional stadium where the plumbing works.
There's not mice running around?
Yeah, no mice that I've seen. On the positive side, guys, when we get on the opposite side of this pandemic, this is going to be a must visit for Broncos fans in terms of taking a trip to Vegas and checking out a pretty awesome stadium. And oh, by the way, turning an arch rival's stadium orange. But that's about it. There's nothing good about today. It's all about, okay, in a couple of years, might be a lot of fun to play this game. Today, this was freaking brutal.
Yeah, it was brutal. And yeah, that was about the most exciting conversation we had here at the DNVR bar today. It was just, oh man, we should put together like a DNVR family retreats to Las Vegas for a Broncos Raiders game next season. Hopefully we get that opportunity. But just brutal. Mace, start with just your biggest takeaway from this game, and then we'll move into kind of what you heard in the pressers.
Well, let's face it. The rest of the season now, you're 3-6. Barring a miracle, you're not going anywhere. So the rest of the season is a referendum on Drew Lock. And while things weren't done to help him today, he was under a lot of pressure. He made bad decisions under pressure, just too many of them. And it sort of comes back to something I feel like we've discussed after earlier games, is that he's not correcting the mistakes. We're seeing some similar things week to week. Certainly, no one expects the progress to be a straight incline, but now at best it's just kind of on a straight line, if not trending down. And so big picture wise, that's the concern, that we're seeing him make a lot of the same mistakes. We're seeing issues not get corrected.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue for me today. Is not only did he make the same mistake that he made last week, he made that same mistake on 3 separate interceptions.
Yeah.
I think 3 separate interceptions. So The problem is, though, and we can go in circles on this all day. If he's not throwing off his back foot, he might not be throwing any at all ever, because he's being forced on his back foot on 3 out of every 4 plays. What did we hear from the coaches and the players after the game?
Well, I mean, they're upset, understandably. I mean, I was asking Dalton Reisner, I was going to ask him just his emotions, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I frame this if I ask him this? And so I framed it in, hey, you're from Colorado, you know all about this. Just what are your feelings? And I didn't even get a chance to finish the question before he said unacceptable. And he came back to that word several times in the course of his availability with the media. Unacceptable. And you know what? We get that. And you hear the usual things from guys about how this team's going to stick together. It's not going to fracture. But at the same time, you've got to see better results. And in particular, you got to see better results earlier in the game. That's another thing that's just so frustrating about this, is that even though the deficit wasn't what it has been after the first half, because the defense really, I thought, held its own under some adverse circumstances in the first half of this game before it ultimately got worn down. But it's the same thing week after week after week, just digging these holes because the offense can't convert on its opportunities, can't get it done in the red zone in the first half. I mean, I think you're kind of seeing this team. It may not be splintering in the locker room, but in terms of kind of emotionally, it feels like it's at a breaking point, and either you fight back or this thing gets totally out of control.
Yeah, and what's really tough, Mace, as we all know, these next few weeks are going to be very tough for the Broncos to show some fight, going up against an undefeated Dolphins team with Tua as their quarterback, the Saints, and the Chiefs. If this team has fight, though, it's not necessarily going to be winning these games. They need to be competitive in these games, and maybe we feel a little better. It's going to be moral victories if there's victories these next couple of weeks, very, very likely. But you come out against the Dolphins, they're a better team than the Raiders, in my opinion. They're going to whoop you more than 25 if you have a similar performance. Against the Saints, they're going to whoop you by more than 20. And against the Chiefs at home on Sunday Night Football, Andy Reid, oh my goodness, that's going to be rough. So if this team doesn't show any fight, it will be very bad in just a couple of weeks.
What sucks so much for this team is that this isn't the team, like this is a patchwork group. And I think that adds to the frustration for this team is, heck, even when you get something going with Albert Okwuegbunam, he goes down and gets injured. And I just, for the front office and for the coaching staff, I just wonder how much they're taking that into account. But regardless of all that, and I do think the Broncos would have been a lot better team this year if they had their full slate of players. I think that's inarguable. But this is 4 straight seasons where you were 3-6 through 9 football games. Anywhere else, that GM is getting canned.
That's a lot of meaningless football down the stretch.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I texted you guys that I think this game broke me. I think one of the things that broke me is the fact that we've seen all this before. We've seen 3-6 before. We keep seeing these bad first halves, digging these huge holes week after week after week, and it's numbing. I mean, when I was flying out here last night, guys, I was thinking about how the Broncos need to win this game for a lot of reasons, but selfishly, I wanted them to win because, hey, at least then we can talk about this season and the playoff possibilities and all that for at least another week or two. We can kind of keep hope alive. And now, once again, guys, we're just kind of playing out the string, and we're probably having draft conversations starting in the next few weeks here.
Yeah, the weird thing is every year before this one, it was very clear what you're talking about when you're talking draft, and that's quarterback. Mm-hmm. And I think we're trending in that direction again. It's just so weird to have that conversation and to have it with John Elway, because it's just he is the constant over this 4-year stretch in which the Broncos have been largely uncompetitive in the division and in many games. And if Drew Lock is not the guy, how can you feel comfortable going back to John Elway to find the guy?
You know what? Someone, I believe in our comment section, maybe it was on Twitter, said Lincoln Riley, head coach. In fact, I think it was in this comment section. Lincoln Riley, head coach in 2021 for the Broncos. Now, what's crazy about that is Lincoln may turn that down. He may say, nah, I'd rather go somewhere else. But one thing that it made me think of was Lincoln Riley, or a type of guy like that, like a top tier caliber coach, is going to want general manager duties. And maybe that's how John Elway, kind of takes a step back, is by saying, okay, I'm not going to bring in a new GM. I'm not going to fire myself. I'm not going to bring a counterpart in here, but I'm going to bring a head coach in, and I'm going to give him more responsibility. And Ryan, maybe that's how it works out, is John Elway sees where this is. He sees where it's been since Peyton left, and he doesn't have to publicly take a step back or anything like that. But they know when they bring in Lincoln Riley or another head coach that, okay, this guy's going to get a lot of say. And then John can say, maybe Lincoln will be able to help me find a quarterback, and I'll be the GM when that happens. That would be an area of hope. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but maybe that's how you feel more comfortable about it.
Zach, I salute your optimism as always. But you're Lincoln Riley. You're 37 years old. And unless things go in the tank in Norman, you're going to be able to pick your job, pick your perfect situation. Why would you go to an organization where they have unsettled ownership and Who knows what's going to happen when this lawsuit starts going through the courts? It's back on the docket for 2021. Why would you come here when there are going to be better gigs if you just sit and wait for the right one?
He already has the better gig. The idea that like all these coaches need to go to the NFL is crazy to me. You get paid just as much, and you get to control what players you get. Like you basically have the first round pick, the number 1 overall pick every year if you want it. You're going up against like 4 other schools for the number 1 overall pick. If you're not getting him, you're getting the number 4 overall pick at quarterback. Whatever you want. Don't go to the NFL. That's my advice to Lincoln Riley. Even though it's looking pretty good for Cliff Kingsbury. Well, he probably would have just stayed at Texas Tech if he was actually successful enough there and was able to get a defense together. So don't leave. Stay right where you are. I feel like I'm Billy Madison. Stay as long as you can.
Well, I mean, with Cliff, who knows if he leaves if he can't select his quarterback? I mean, everything just lined up perfectly. He goes to Arizona. He gets somebody that he trusts that can do the things that he wants, that can do the things that he wants to do. And obviously because, Texas Tech and Oklahoma, they're all kind of in that same realm in terms of being offensive philosophy. He knew through those connections what Kyler could do. And so it worked out brilliantly. I mean, it's, and I would say your logic even goes to a couple other names that I've seen starting to pop up on lists. I've seen Ryan Day from Ohio State pop up on some of these candidate lists. Luke Fickell from Cincinnati. Why? Well, you got it made at these places. Why would you leave?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, you do.
If I'm any of these guys, I never even consider leaving college football, especially if I'm at a blue blood program. Luke Fickell's a different scenario, but for him, like I would just wait until a blue blood program wants to hire me, and then I'll take that job. Coaching in the NFL is a different beast. It's way more difficult, and a lot of guys I think have like the call of the wild where they want to prove that they can do it at the highest level, and I respect that a lot. But my advice to them would be just don't.
My advice to Luke Fickell would be talk to Scott Frost because Cincinnati is one of those jobs that's probably better than at least half of the Power 5 jobs at this point. So, think twice before making that move.
Maybe undefeated head coach Carl Durrell gets the call to the big league.
I thought you wouldn't give him up at this point. I mean, everything's going so great. You've got CU in the playoff.
He's the GOAT. I didn't put them in the playoff. I just said many people are asking.
Maybe here's what you do, guys. You bring Peyton Manning in to be the quarterback coach, and then you build from there.
Oh, of course. Yes, the Peyton Manning quarterback coach. That's a classic. Okay. Last conversation I want to have here, and you can take this across the whole season, or we can just talk about this game. So let's just start, I guess, with this game. Who is most at fault for what went down today as the Broncos lost by 25 points to the Raiders? Zach, I'll start with you.
Drew Lock. And to me, it's easy. Like we said to start the show, it's everyone. But the most to blame is Drew Lock. Guys, the Raiders had 5 takeaways as a defense coming into this game. 5 total. The Broncos had 5 today. Drew Lock was responsible for 4 of them. That's inexcusable. Inexcusable. A great quarterback is supposed to be able to raise the talent of everyone around him. Today, Drew Lock lowered it substantially for everyone. He did not give the Broncos a chance in this game. And the rest of the team, well, I shouldn't say the rest of the team, the defense, at least for half of the game, gave them a chance. And Drew Lock did not do it. So to me, there's no more excuses. Today it was absolutely Drew.
Mace. I hate to be an echo chamber on what Zach said, but you know what? Everything you said, Zach, is spot on, right down to the fact that your defense did give you a shot. You weren't sitting there at halftime down by 2 scores. Your defense was coming up with stops. It was keeping you in it. Yeah, nice little assist from Nelson Aguilar dropping a potential touchdown pass there late in the second quarter, but your defense was keeping you in the game. It was giving you a fighting chance. And Drew Lock just making poor decisions. I mean, both the 2 interceptions in the first half, just incredibly poor choices that kept you from being in front at halftime. And this is one of those things where, like Vic Fangio said, everybody's fingerprints are on this, but whose are the most culpable? Unfortunately, it's the quarterback. It's number 3.
Thank you for that nice comment there, Levi.
Yes,
we needed a little pick me up today. I can't disagree with you guys today. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons why Drew Lock is not playing well. And Drew Lock is one of those reasons. And today he was his own worst enemy. He didn't have protection, and that sucks. But you cannot just give the ball to the other team. I mean, a couple of those interceptions were just easy pickings. So why did the Broncos get blown out? Because they turned the ball over 5 times, and 4 of those times were Drew Lock's fault. And it honestly should have been worse. You mentioned the Aguilar TD. There's also a Darren Waller TD that should have happened if he didn't drop the ball. So, Drew, you just can't do it. You don't have help from your offensive line. You're throwing off your back foot for a reason, but you can't. You can't make those throws over and over again. Last week he made an incredible back foot throw to Jerry Jeudy up the sideline. Those are the kind of ones that you can get away with because it's up the sideline in single coverage. You're not throwing it off your back foot into the middle of the field where, a little bit of error here and there ends in a pick. So too many bad decisions. I can excuse a lot of different things, but just throwing it up and playing 500 out there, it's inexcusable. So I think Drew takes the bear of the brunt today. But unfortunately, the problem with the Broncos and the problems with this team and this offense go much, much deeper than Drew.
Yeah, and as the Oso Blanco realized, my sad plant is now in plant rehab. And guys, that's what the Broncos need right now. They need some football rehab. And maybe by the time my plant has some life, the Broncos football team will have life as well. Hopefully it's soon. Yeah,
someone on Twitter said, are you guys going to talk about how the hold in the end zone just sums it all up? And it's true. Like, the Broncos make a great play call, Pat Shurmur, good job. And Noah Fant just gets a little unnecessarily grabby, did not affect the play. Like, if he just pushes him with his palms flat, this is a touchdown still. It gets called back. It's a holding. The next play is an interception. And this goes back to a conversation we've had for a long time, which is that the Broncos aren't good enough to overcome those things. We talk about this. Patrick Mahomes probably scores a touchdown on the next play or 2 plays later. The Broncos offense is not good enough. Their margin for error is very slim. And so when they score a touchdown and they take it off the board, you hope it's only a 4-point swing. But in this case, it ends up in a 7-point swing. And that really is just a microcosm of what's going on for this team right now.
It's a microcosm. And also kind of the reaction bothered me because it's a clear hold. I mean, he doesn't have to do it, but you got your arm around the guy and you're grabbing the back of his jersey. The official's there. If it affects the play or if it's in the vicinity of the play, he's going to call it. And then Noah Fant's kind of pleading his case. And I'm thinking, come on, man, you got caught red-handed. You held. You shouldn't have held. You didn't have to hold, but you held.
Yeah. And again, he had such a physical advantage on that guy. You don't have to grab him. And I think what happened is he just didn't know which way Drew was going to go, if Drew was going to cut up or cut out. And so when Drew cuts outside of him, he, instead of just moving his feet, he kind of just got grabby, and that's easy for the ref to see. It sucks. And the commenter's right. It's very much, it sums it all up for the Broncos.
Yep, it does. Mace, my last thing for you is, what was Drew Lock's mood like after the game? Was he did it seem like he was very down? Because if the Broncos are going to have any shot at turning this around, and honestly, if Drew Lock is going to be able to prove to the Broncos that he's the guy, it's all on his shoulders.
He seemed down, and unfortunately, that's what we've seen talking to Drew Lock here after the game 3 times in the last 4 games. He's down, and he's searching for answers. Sometimes when you're in that scenario, you're trying to think of a way to phrase the question where it's not going to sound, like it's just twisting the knife. And so I actually asked him to say, okay, was there any surprises from the Raiders? Any different coverages that they threw in? Anything that was not on the film? And he said, no, everything was there. Just threw it to the wrong guys. And so, on I hear that and I'm like, oh man, I mean, at least if they threw something unexpected at you, then you could say, well, I mean, it was a new look. We were a little bit confounded. But if everything that you saw today coverage-wise was there before and you made those throws, not good. Not good at all.
Yeah, and again, it's just him trying to do too much on throwaway plays. I mean, you look at those interceptions. There's usually a free rusher coming right at him.
Mm-hmm.
Just got to learn to throw it away or take a sack. And I just don't think he has that in him right now because he knows that if the Broncos, punt on these possessions, then they're probably out of the game because they're coming from behind in just about every single one of these games. So
right,
it's a tough situation to be in, but it's I don't know how it's getting fixed anytime soon. That's the hardest thing for me is I don't know if this is the right coaching staff. I don't know if it's the right quarterback. I don't know if it's the right GM. And we know for a fact that it's not the right owner because there isn't one. So this is an intersection for the Broncos. And I wish I had the answers for how it's all going to get turned around, but they've got a long ways to go.
Yeah, and as Andrew Romero points out in the comment section, why does our rebuild take 5 and more years? We're seeing countless other dumpster fire teams completely turn it around much quicker.
What
I guess
rebuild?
that's right, exactly. And that's probably where it starts, Ryan, is admitting that you have to start somewhere, that you have to rebuild. And that's kind of the bummer of where the Broncos are at, is just it's another year. That's another 3-6 start. On the encouraging side, though, I'll end with some optimism. That shows you that you can turn this around a lot quicker than the Broncos are doing. So maybe it's not another 5 years. Maybe it is 1 or 2 years. I mean, you see what Kyler Murray did today. Holy smokes, Ryan, your guy at the very end of the game, the Hail Mary. You see what the Dolphins are doing with Tua. Now, theirs was certainly a long rebuild, but now it's starting to turn around from them. There's young teams that are looking really good right now. And the Broncos have a lot of good pieces. It's just certainly not coming together.
I'll finish with some optimism too. You're trending towards having a top 10 pick. And whether you end up taking a quarterback with that pick or taking someone else with that pick, you are going to hopefully, if you get it right, add an elite talent to a already really full group of good young players. And when you do that, and then you bring back Von Miller most likely, and you bring back Cortland Sutton, and you go through the whole list of all the guys who are out this year and injured, then you might be one of those teams who has one of those turnarounds that everyone says, wow, how did they go from 3-13 or 4-12 to 10-6 or 11-5? And that's how you do it, is you nail draft picks and you get these situations figured out, and you're healthy. A lot of these teams that turn it around quickly have great bills of health. So you're going to probably have a chance to get a really good player and add him to this young core.
Well, if you want to do that, then maybe what you need to do is go 1-6 the rest of the way, go 4-12, and be sitting kind of where the 49ers were back heading into 2019 when they were able to pick really high and get Nick Bosa and add him to that. That's maybe you just need to bottom out the rest of the way here against a pretty demanding schedule.
Yep.
Holy,
absolutely.
Oh my gosh. It's crazy to think that, the Broncos maybe could be in a situation where they got the best non-quarterback in the draft. But then, of course, if you're talking about that, you're probably talking about a quarterback.
Yeah,
Probably. Well, we're going to have plenty more conversations about this as the week goes on. You can, of course, catch us on the DNVR Broncos podcast all week. For those of you watching on YouTube, we'd love if you hit us with a thumbs up, even though the game wasn't a thumbs up. Hopefully you thought our performance was worthy of a thumbs up. You can, of course, always subscribe to our channel as well. You can get set up for alerts when we go live. But for today, that's going to wrap it up for us on the DNVR Broncos postgame show. Shout out to Breckenridge Brewery for presenting these. We will talk to you guys on the podcast tomorrow.